So Sarah, do you have anything to kick us off?
Um, Thank you, commissioners. I just would introduce that this is a work session on deferred maintenance items at the Douglas County Correctional Facility. At our work sessions that happen at 4 o'clock on Wednesdays, these are for informational purposes only. No decision. Hey, Jay, can you mute yourself and so we can speak? Yeah, you're getting some interference. Thanks. Um, we we do not make any decisions at these meetings. They're for informational purposes only, and no decisions will be made. And with this, I believe I'm going to turn it over to uh, perhaps Sheriff. Are you kicking us off, or okay? I'll turn it over to Sheriff Armbruster.
All right. Thank you, commissioners. And so the we'll start by, and we've had some conversations, but about these large ticket maintenance items. And it was pointed out the other day, and I think it's a good point to make, is that they've been called deferred maintenance items. However, these have actually been on our radar as a county for several years. And once the jail expansion project came to light, they were kind of rolled into that project. And then once that project was shut down, they were pulled back out. So we don't want to make it look like this is something that we're just picking and choosing from that project. These are things that are big ticket, but they're also things we've been planning for some time, and they're as part of this big thing. So I can't get off in the weeds about the details so much, because a lot of these are fairly complicated things that I know very little about. But what I do know is that the experts in their field have identified these as things that we need to talk about and look at getting done, so that we can have a seamless transition into the future of our current facility. And then I also want to make the point that is several of us have had individual conversations about projects that I may want to do at the jail or have discussed. Those will come at a later time. This is just, in fact, we even pulled a piece as far as the current courtroom within the jail and what we're going to do with that. We pulled that out of this deferred maintenance project because we feel like that's just something that needs to be handled separately, and we want the commission's input and to be to understand what it is that we're trying to do with that. But these are more of the skeleton of the building, making sure that everything is operating good. So I'll turn it over to Jay Zimmershed to talk a little bit more about the details. But if you have any questions, I'm here to answer what I can.
Thank you, Sheriff. Is everybody getting feedback, or am I okay here?
You're okay.
Good to go? Okay. Well, commissioners, thank you for having us here to discuss the project in these specific pieces. I think the sheriff said it very eloquently in terms of these are pieces that are critical to daily operations of the existing building. Nothing to do with anything other than keeping the building running. It's now, I believe we've decided it was constructed in 1990, between 97 and 99 ish, and has been in operation ever since. And I think it's critical to realize on facilities like this specifically, I would liken these to hospitals and to jails pretty much. I'm not sure I have another good example, but these type facilities run 24/7, 365. There's no setback at night for the equipment to rest. When they got turned on in the late 90s, they've been running ever since. And so that's a testament actually to as far as they have gone. And so really what I think the lion's share of this project centers around is the idea about replacing these pieces that have basically reached their serviceable lives, and doing it in a proactive way, not a reactive way. If we plan now and do this smart, we keep the building fully operational and going, and can do these pieces, sequence them into the daily operations of the building so that there's actually no interruptions. We don't have a building unconditioned and can't use it. So we'll avoid doing that as part of this. Again, I think probably the most important thing to take away from this approach is the fact that we're doing this proactively and not reactively. If we had a boiler or a chiller just drop because of its age, we're now in an emergency situation where we're trying to replace that piece of equipment. And as we get further down the road here, you'll see and look at some of the scheduled pieces. These pieces of equipment take, 6 to 8 months to, well, I don't know about months, weeks, sorry, 6 to 8 weeks to get them fabricated and actually to the site in order to put in. So if we have one of these pieces of equipment go down, it becomes a challenge. Maintenance staff is either trying to find a way to keep it running, or we're trying to figure out how to do without it for some time. As part of the project, we have been working with Turner Construction and in discussion with Trainer Architects. Those two groups are intimately involved with the facility and understanding of what these pieces actually entail. I think in your packet you had a spreadsheet that kind of lays out the individual pieces and what they are. The primary one in that, the biggest, probably most important item, is the central plant. That is replacement of the boiler and chiller, as I mentioned, which is now approaching, I think we've decided 25 years old, not quite 30, but they've still been running a long time. Another item is doing one-for-one replacements on the parking lot, repairing pavement that just has gone bad over 30 years, and curb and gutter. Another is the sliding detention doors, and this is another one that is absolutely critical to operations in that there are 32 sliding doors that they use to manage the jail population, and making sure that those doors are up and running is critical to facility operations. Another item you'll see is an upgrade of the elevators. We were informed that it's, again, almost been 30 years, and the elevator manufacturer that was originally installed back in the 90s is no longer supporting the brains of the system for the elevator, and so we're needing to do an elevator upgrade. There are 3 of those elevators, and all 3 are scheduled to be upgraded as part of that. Again, the building at its age, we're looking at resealing exterior expansion joints, control joints, sealant joints at the windows to make sure that we're keeping a watertight building and keeping water infiltration from getting in and deteriorating the walls of the building. And then a final item on here is replacement of cast iron piping. Sanitary piping in the maximum pod specifically. There has been over its life now, the cast iron was the way you did it. We're now doing this many times out of PVC in lieu of cast iron, probably for this reason, but it's rusting out, and then they have a failure, and it's a pretty messy thing. So looking at replacement of that piping, swapping out cast iron to go to PVC. We do have an alternate on here to look at only doing the horizontal pieces. Depending upon how these discussions move forward, we can look at that as a potential option, and that would then replace only the horizontal components of the cast iron and replace them with PVC. Those are the ones having the significant problems. So I think that in a nutshell is a kind of a quick discussion of the scope of what we believe belongs inside this maintenance package. We have done additional research with the city to go through and look at what this means in terms of permitting the project to be able to move forward. There are only 2 components of this that would actually need to be permitted, and that is the central plant. They do inspection on piping as part of their standard observation component with the city, and then also the sanitary replacement switch from cast iron to PVC. So 2 very small pieces. This would only need to go to building permitting. We're not changing the footprint of the building. We're not changing the parking. We're putting things back one for one, and so it would go straight to building inspections, and I think it would be a very smooth and easy process. Currently, we asked the CM at risk that we were working with on the jail expansion project and the architect to give us a schedule. I believe this was also in your packet.
And Jay, CM at risk stands for Construction Manager at Risk. which is the construction company we're working with that we went through a selection process and selected. Now, go ahead, Jay.
Okay, sorry about that. And so you'll see on that schedule that we have time in there. We will need to do a small package of drawings, basically extracting the pieces that were embedded in the expansion project and make them their own separate project and get those submitted to the city. And then the CM provides this is a very rough schedule, very beginning thoughts to basically support this discussion. But as part of this, one of the reasons we were interested in using the construction manager at risk that we have is that they have extensive experience in working in institutional environments. And so part of this project, one of the biggest parts, I believe, will be working with sheriff staff to make sure we're integrating these pieces such that the jail remains fully operational throughout the construction process. So we take down one elevator at a time, so they'd have 2 elevators to work with, so that's one example. The other is we're on a boiler and chiller system, and others here will know more about this, but you want to replace one of those pieces of equipment at a specific time in the year because it's not really being utilized. You'd replace the chiller in the winter because it's not being utilized, and then you'd replace the boiler in the summer because you're not heating with it. And so working with a group like that to integrate those pieces so the jail is serviced and remains fully operational was kind of critical. Another decision in thinking about moving forward, or the idea of utilizing the construction manager at risk contract that we have in place or had in place for the original jail expansion project, is that this group works all over the nation, and they have the ability to buy direct from mechanical manufacturers. And they do this frequently in their projects. They'll buy direct from the manufacturer and provide that equipment in lieu of the plumber or the HVAC group. Whoever would provide that, Turner can go and buy, and they have direct buying power, which actually we believe will save us some money. And so for all those reasons, we approached Turner Construction and requested some of this information, that they assist us further with planning in this regard to get this information together for everyone. That brings me, let me make sure I'm not jumping out of line. I'm not. It brings me to the summary of the project, which was the total project budget that we anticipate currently. Again, this is information and it is preliminary. We still need to have a little bit of design work done, then repricing and some of those pieces, but we're believing these are good numbers based on the fact that these groups are so in tune with the project anyway. You'll see the maintenance project is at basically 3.78 million, 3.79 million. And then you can see the list of owner furniture, fixtures, and equipment. There's almost nothing. We get down to owner professional services and contingency. We're at 63,500 for design services to get those pieces extracted, submitted to the city, and do CA through the process. Anticipating planning fees, it's pretty prescriptive with the city. You can get a pretty specific number of 17,000 there. And then we're carrying an owner contingency outside of what would be a GMP with the construction manager at risk. We're carrying our number separate in case we have some surprises, if we open up ceilings and the plumbing's in worse shape than we thought, or who knows. And you'll see that at 151,592. Adding all of it together, you come up down to a number that is right at 4,022,000 for an entire consolidated project. A difference that you might see between our summary sheet and that spreadsheet, if you're looking at that from Turner and trying to decipher them, is that we extracted the owner contingency and have it out separately where they grouped it in. So if you add those two numbers together, it'll add up to what's on their spreadsheet. Again, the thought process behind trying to move this project forward quickly, carefully, and frankly intelligently was to utilize the contracts that we have in place for design and construction. We don't have to go back out to bid. We have already gone through the RFP process for this. It would be simply writing an amendment that would change the scope of the project from being something much, much bigger to simply being this. And then we're utilizing those contracts that are in place. We avoid going through an RFP process, bid process, all these other things. And so that's a summary of where I think the project stands to date and the ideal path that we see to completing it. I don't think I have any other additional information other than I think this group would stand for questions.
Thank you, Jay. I really appreciate you walking us through all of that. And I don't know if this question goes to you or Sheriff Armbruster, but I recognize the necessity for moving forward quickly with all of the deferred maintenance. As you mentioned, you've also talked about some potential remodeling that you want to do. A big part of what we heard around discussions of jail expansion, and even some of what Jay is pointing out when it comes to some of these contracts, is that it can be cheaper to bundle some of this work together. Does it make sense for us to kind of think through that remodeling piece now? And if it doesn't, like, how do we see that timeline kind of working out? What would the remodeling timeline look like?
I had a similar question, Commissioner Portillo, and I just wanted to add on to it and ask what the timeline of the current contracts we have are. Are they set to expire at a certain time already, or anything we need to be mindful of there?
Well, Jay, why don't you answer that one first, and then we'll get into the other.
The simple question is no, there is not. Sorry. No, there is not. Basically, the contracts are in place and have been left in place, but all exposure to the county stopped at what we call pre-con, which is where we were on that project. So we have an open contract that we can rewrite a scope for and simply change what the scope of the project is and move forward with all the contractual pieces, the 12, 22 pages document that lines out all the various pieces of a contract already in place. So no, there is no formal expiration date.
Let me see if I can say that what Jay said slightly differently. So the only thing we committed to with Turner Construction was pre-construction, which is pre-con. We had not entered into a contract for the construction based off a particular scope. So, and they have graciously continued to kind of follow the project. So there's no set to expire date. Jay.
Well said.
Well, I know I'm supposed to be answering questions, but can I ask a question as well? So
for sure, it's supposed to be a dialogue.
Okay, so Jay, I think maybe to get to Commissioner Reed's question is, like, when you have a bid put out for housework and you sit on it for a long time, sometimes the cost of materials go up, sometimes the cost of labor goes up. Are we locked in for a certain amount of time for these projects that we have budgeted, this 4.022 million, for a certain amount of time? Like, if we don't sign off on it by a certain date, are those prices subject to change?
I think go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, I would say that we don't have firm pricing for this deferred maintenance project. What you have are estimates. So there would need to be drawings done to make sure that they could properly take that to bid, and then they would solicit bids for it. The construction manager would manage that process for it. So we don't, their pricing from before is old. And what we're using now would be estimates that they would confirm in a later process.
Okay, all right. That makes sense.
Get that wrong? Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Exactly
and
right.
Then to your question, Commissioner Portillo, is that I would say that the ideas that I have in my head and the discussions that you and I and we've all had center around specifically one area of the jail in the work release, and I have several ideas of some other places. While I suppose the idea of bundling and maybe getting a better price is a good idea, certainly something I'll look at and we'll look at. But what I don't think is happening is I don't think we'll be duplicating or undoing any of this work that we are doing. So, like, if we end up taking on some project to rework a housing unit, it's not going to undo something we just paid to have upgraded. Because again, this is the skeleton and the organs of the building. And since we won't be changing footprints or that kind of stuff. However, though, I think it's good business to just at least make sure that we aren't missing an opportunity to, have a Groupon, buy one, get one free or something. So I think that we can certainly look into that.
I'd also add that, I think that's a conversation we can also have with the construction manager, just talking about specific scopes and really, are we putting together a package that makes sense in terms of some of those pieces? From the way it appears to, as it's how this project is sort of forming. I mean, these are scopes with a similar group of contractors. They're mechanical, they're plumbing, they're HVAC systems, they're elevators. If we were to get into other areas where you'd be looking at more demolition and, more facility framework, those kinds of issues, cells, those types of issues are a different set of contractors. But it's certainly something we can talk to them about in terms of, making sure that we're not reworking it. I would say, and Dave maybe could speak to this better, because our director of maintenance, Dave Sparks, has been a part of the Douglas County Correctional Facility for a very long period of time and knows that building very well in terms of its systems. We are beginning to get worried about finding parts, from some of these systems, and I'm not sure, Dave, maybe you could speak a little bit more about how difficult it is getting to maintain certain pieces.
Hi, Commissioners. I'm Dave Sparks. I spent my first 15 years working for the county out there at the jail when it opened up running maintenance. One of the things that, like the boilers and chillers, part of it is efficiency. The efficiencies of these really aren't that great. The boilers are about a 70-some% efficient. The newer ones are going to be over 90%. The chiller itself, it's a refrigerant that is no longer manufactured. If we have a leak in one of those systems and lose all the refrigerant out of there, you're looking at over $35,000 just to find the refrigerant to replace it. They have well over 65,000 hours on those. The chillers are a seasonal operation type thing, but 65,000 hours, you stop and think about how long that is and the kind of temperatures we've had to run to keep the building, satisfied. You're looking at 100-degree days and all that. So the parts, you'll still be able to find some of the parts. It's just the environmental impact is part of the concern. But again, the refrigerant on those chillers is a major part of this. They quit making it 2 years ago. It's refrigerant 22. It's the same thing used in residential units. And if you need to replace yours at your home, you're replacing the whole system because you cannot get this stuff anymore.
I appreciate, thanks, David. I appreciate you bringing up energy efficiency, and was wondering how that had been factored into the plans or the further designs and drawings that will be determined, and just making sure that we are looking for materials and replacement systems, especially that are really going to have a positive impact long-term on both the economics and the eco-friendliness of what is a pretty big facility. Certainly that old of a building can't be, suddenly in a LEED silver building.
Well, it's a cast in place building, which means you have concrete walls that are pre-manufactured or put together, they're welded together. They are not the most, it's not that a real tight building. And in fact, all of the air that goes through the each one of the cells, as you might say, that is discharged to the outside. You cannot put that back into the system like a return air in your home or anything like that. So you're constantly bringing in outside air and you're having to condition it. And then, so 100-degree day, you're bringing in 100-degree air to make up for the air that you're kicking out of the cells. So the equipment that we've looked at and Isaac, which actually runs a jail for me out there, we have gone and looked at some of these chillers. The boilers, we actually have those here. Very, very efficient. They're remarkable. We're going to be going from, 80 or maybe 80% efficient to well over 90%. When you're looking at these type of boilers, we're able to stage down to like 10% of running, where the ones that are out there now, once you get to a certain set point, it shuts off. Then you have to go through a whole system where you're wasting energy when they go to refire. So we did spend a lot of time looking at efficiencies.
This is Commissioner Kelly. Sheriff, you mentioned, that you have some plans, some things in your head and some ideas, and you mentioned work release. And I think to Commissioner Portillo's point, I'm interested in your timeline for when you think you might bring those forward. One interpretation could be is that we are avoiding an uncomfortable conversation by talking about these maintenance problems, and that by splitting the two, we may be avoiding that conversation, but I do question whether we're really avoiding any additional costs. Do you have a timeline for those ideas?
Yes, and great question. And I learned about avoiding uncomfortable conversations through a really good leadership class I went through. But luckily, I've been pretty open about the ideas, and I know they're going to be expensive. So I don't, and the reason I don't really have a timeline, honestly, to be totally honest here, is that I don't understand the process of what I have to go through to even get this stuff going. I have a lot of things in my head. I'm putting pencil to paper, but as far as like putting things out for bid, getting ideas, finding out, what I can and can't do just in general is taking me some time. So I suppose my offer here is that if we need to sit and let me spill all of the ideas that I have for everybody to look at, and the experts in the room to kind of say, hey, we can tie this to this or that to that, or we're going to have this needs to be on its own. I am more than happy to do that. And the one thing I don't want to do is avoid or try to look like I'm hiding anything, because we're all in this together, and I want this facility to be running and running it efficiently, not only from a heating and air standpoint, but also from our community standpoint. So I don't know what the next step would be, but if it's as simple as me putting pen to paper and presenting you all with my ideas, with some pictures, drawings, and thoughts about what I want to see done within the facility, I'm ready to do that. I've been ready for months. I just frankly need someone to kick me in the right direction.
So if I might suggest a possibility of a way to do that, to move from that piece, my suggestion would be is if, we want to be really cautious with this. So I guess this would be one of the things that we would like commissioners to be supportive of the consensus to do this, which would be to go back to our design firm for this project and have them sit down with the sheriff's office and talk about what's possible. It is some of the ideas the sheriff have possible for, retrofitting an existing facility. They may come back and say, you're going to spend 50 times the amount of money than that it would be to do that. And then it just really becomes unworkable. So, my suggestion would be is to have him and the sheriff's team sit down with, sit down with the architect and talk through the possibilities, if that's what the commission is supportive of. That's kind of why we have these work sessions, is to try to gauge support of these issues and, doing them. My concern, what I would say is I think that process could be arranged to start very quickly. My estimation, and Jay's an architect, I just work near them from time to time. I'd say design could be a year for something very kind of different like this. Jay, am I being too conservative in that estimation of time? You're on mute.
I think that's probably real in terms of a time from an idea to actual completion. A year certainly is very feasible. I do think that and I hope that we are coming out of this pandemic and the effect that it may have on what the jail sees as operations and needs, and how that plays into it is another good reason to potentially look at these things as separate projects, because the potential for that and how we come out of that, and then the whatever occurs following it, these kind of maintenance pieces are still very real and very needed. And so keeping those projects separate, as I'm listening to everybody talk here, seems to make sense to me. But yeah, I think a timeline like that does look very real in terms of a year to actually complete it from, idea to construction and completion and operation. So
This is Commissioner Portillo. Help me understand, just clarify a little bit. So are you saying a year of design work or a year from start to finish?
Well, again, I'll be honest, I have not reviewed any of this with the sheriff's department, so I'm not, I'm kind of making this up in a vacuum, but depending on the size of the project, a year to design and complete would probably be possible. I don't know what the extent we're talking about here either, or how disruptive it would be to the jail operations and how they may have to work around those pieces, but I think you could do design work if we knew what the function of the building was. The design work could happen fairly quickly as long as it's relegated to a fairly small portion of the jail. But then you've got the whole bid process. Then you've got the submitting to the city, which again, non-expansion of the footprint. It'll be all internal. It'll just be building permit. But there are many steps in that process that it'll stretch out to at least a year, I would think. Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, in my experience, drawings from scratch, Jay. I mean, it's a year and a half to construction, all the way through construction.
It could be, yes.
At least.
This commission. Oh, sorry, Sarah. Go ahead.
No, that was it.
Okay. This is Commissioner Reed. Commissioner Kelly, I appreciate your point, and I don't want us to be avoidant of conversations, and am interested in how to structure some time and kind of make a plan to give space to those ideas to determine feasibility and practicality of it, and at the same time see this as a bit of it's kind of like triage. Like this list of maintenance projects are acute needs, and I appreciate the approach of trying to be proactive rather than having a crisis situation to react to. And it seems that even though these are just estimates and there's still some work to get to hard numbers, that a plan is formulated and a framework exists to be able to move forward on addressing safety and health concerns first and foremost, and big ideas and creative solutions to other issues. I'm here for, and I'm excited about those conversations, but nervous to tie them to this particular deferred maintenance package, I suppose, as we are calling it, and really wanting to not hold that up or tie that up because it impacts health and safety of the people that are there. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I thought I started that with maybe a question in my head, but it's left me. So I guess those are just my comments.
And if I could make one last point, is that with the reason we're kind of pushing on this, and we've decided we wanted to get this on the agenda as quick as we could, was simply because it's been waiting for so long. It was put on hold to roll it into the expansion project. And I think we're at the point now where, I don't want to say critical, but it's getting to where it's a bit more important, and we need to maybe triage it a bit more ahead of some of these other ideas that I may have. But oh, I'm sorry, I got sirens in the background. So I think but agreed. I don't want it to look like we are trying to create a diversion to avoid talking about the hard stuff, because I'm actually looking forward to the hard stuff.
So this Commissioner Reed again, Sarah, if I understood you correctly, it seems like maybe a next step would be to arrange for time for the sheriff's office and architects to have a bit of an initial brainstorm, an idea dump, and then go from there about what's feasible and what would come back to us as a commission for a public work session like this on further ideas.
Yes, I
Okay.
think that would be that would towards the second part of, reconfiguring spaces in the jail. That would be the next step, and I think we can do the two things at once. The commissioners could make a decision about deferred maintenance. We could go, instruct the construction manager and the design team to finish those drawings and prepare information for commission consideration on deferred maintenance while those initial conversations happen in terms of design with the sheriff's office and the architect. And I think they'll be able to give us a pretty good idea pretty quickly as to how reasonable and feasible certain pieces are, and can kind of move both projects ahead, knowing that one may start and go underway before another one does.
I remembered my question from before. I don't know if this is for you, Sarah, or maybe you, Sheriff Armbruster, but just curious specifically for public who may be watching this now or later to know what the funding mechanism is and the source of the money for this project, in particular because it was all tied up in the jail expansion project and is now taking a new shape. I just wonder if somebody could give a bit of context to that.
I can handle that. Over the years, over the last several years, Douglas County has set aside funds both in its annual operating capital improvement plan budget and at year end through year end transfers, as well as in 2019, the Douglas County Commission I should say reallocated funds internally from other projects to prepare for jail expansion work. So those are the sources of the funds, either funds that we've set aside for capital improvement projects, year-end funds for transfer, and the amount of funds that were reduced in 2019 have all led to in essence, an account, a savings account that has been set aside for the jail expansion that I believe here in 2021 is at $11 million.
Thank you.
I have one more question. It's a very technical one, and maybe you said it, but I must have missed it. On the bids package summary, there's close to $500,000 for detention equipment. And as Jay was going through, I didn't hear what that was. Can you, what is that?
The door, right?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, is it the door handle?
It's the overhead sliding tracks for the detention sliders. They're literally worn out. Sheriff's group, jump in here if I'm misspeaking, but there's 32 of those doors that basically the parts aren't made for, so we're having to have kind of, I believe they're coming out and replacing the head unit on that so that the sliding equipment keeps those doors functional. And again, that's another one of those pieces where they will be doing that in sequence with the sheriff's department to be sure that you only have, one door down at a time or two doors down at a time, so that the facility remains fully operational while it's going on. But that's what it's for.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify, maybe I missed it earlier, but Jay, are you with construction manager at risk? Or are you with trainer?
So I apologize. I should have introduced our director of capital projects, Jay Zimmer.
Okay.
He works for us at the county. and works both his title of Director of Capital Projects. He works really as our representative, the owner of these facilities, and helps us navigate and manage each of these projects. Jay's currently heavily engaged in the behavioral health campus and the construction work happening for the crisis center, but has been on board for both the building of transitions and the cottages as well.
Thanks,
I'm
Sarah.
sorry. I should have introduced him. No, it's
Thank
my
you. Nice to officially meet you, Jane.
You too.
Well, I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to get some more understanding of everything, and I'm looking forward to some future conversations that might track along the same time about some of your big ideas, Jay Armbruster, that is.
No, and while we don't make decisions at these meetings, what I'm hearing is some consensus around continuing forward movement on the deferred maintenance pieces, and continuing to get firmer number estimates and continue the design drawings, and at the same time then taking that secondary conversation around reconfiguring and having the sheriff's office team sit down with the design team and begin to talk about what's possible. And we can keep the commission updated. Each of those items will come back for future commission item formal approval, but that's the kind of direction we need at this point to move forward.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how that's where it feels like the conversation is at for me too. And so this gave some good clarity. And so just again, for clarification for public purposes also, it'll come back on as a regular 5:30 business meeting in the future, an agenda item that that the commission would formally vote to approve starting the project. Okay.
Yes.
And at those meetings is where people can make public comment and obviously where decisions are made.
Yes. I would say most definitely for moving forward on the deferred maintenance piece, we may need even another work session to kind of explore those reconfiguration ideas. I would anticipate that would come back to like a session like this.
Sure.
Or we'd, and sometimes we can schedule certain items to happen at 5:30 as well. If we just have a work session that's already full. So we're allowed to have discussion at 5:30. It's just, we generally try to move longer items that are going to take more time to 4 o'clock.
Sarah, I think you've interpreted it well. My only reservation is, I think, and I guess it sounds to me like the maintenance that needs to be done right away. And I know that that's something that has been put off and put off and put off. In an ideal world, we would be able to do maybe some of Sheriff Armbruster's ideas and that deferred maintenance at the same time. But I think we can't put off this maintenance any longer. And so we're just going to have to move ahead, even if there is I'm not sure I agree with the sheriff that there will be no cost differential. I think just moving people onto site and things like that, and the design costs and the permitting costs and all of that, that's something we'd have to do again. So this may not be the cheapest way to do it, but it's probably the least worst way to do it.
Well, I think we've gotten everything we need from the commission at this point, unless Sheriff Armbruster, if you have any other questions or concerns or any other comments you'd like to make.
I do not. And again, I'm looking forward to all of our conversations moving forward. And this was obviously our first opportunity to work in an official capacity, and I'm super excited. So thank you very much, commissioners.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
So now we'll recess until our 5:30 business meeting. See many of you back there then.
Thank you.